Alright, welcome to my 9th lecture of quantitative finance. Does anyone know when the exam is? The first exam? So, I mean, if not, I don't know either, but I will figure that out soon because I think it's probably in the beginning of January, I suppose. I mean, I would be surprised if it's before Christmas. But because I think you have to register anyways for that exam, right? So yeah, but maybe I will figure it out until tomorrow, and then we can briefly talk about that. But what I came up with yesterday, I had the idea, what I could ask in the first exam. And so, I mean, one part of the exam will be, like the first part will be that you have to derive something, some easy things that we have done here during the lecture on the whiteboard. And also I will provide you with like a program code, and then you will be supposed to figure out what's the error. What's the error and how can you make it better, how to make your code running. That's going to be, but it will be only a small code, of course, because the exam is of limited time. So that's basically what you can expect. Yeah? And for the term paper you will get some data, and I don't know what kind of data you will get. So last year and the year before, the students got S&P 500 stock data. So maybe I will give you currencies, or maybe cryptocurrencies, let's see, something interesting, and then you will get some tasks that you are supposed to do with that data, based upon what you learned here in the lecture. So, and no, I will not ask the same like I asked students last term. Of course not. And there is like one of these old term papers online. I think it's the 2016 term paper. That's still like online here. It is on the Moodle page, so that you can have a look on that. What I used to ask, but I will not ask the same thing this time. Yeah, I told you already last time. Today's topic is Fama-MacBeth regressions, and you might wonder, okay, why would you learn that? Why do you need that anyways? So last time I gave you already an example. Let's say you have, for instance, 2,000 hedge funds that you would like to investigate. And you have a data series of, let's say, 60 months, 5 years of data available. So obviously, you cannot run the TRS test because you have only 60 time series observations, but 2,000 cross-sectional observations. So you lack degrees of freedom. And the idea is then, of course, that you would use, in this case, the Fama-MacBeth approach. In the same manner, if you investigate other assets, for instance, nowadays, this cryptocurrencies, where you have thousands of currencies all of a sudden, but the data series is very short that we have available. So Bitcoin started in 2008, right? And the more we go, the more we approach today, 2018. The more cryptocurrencies exist, is the number of cryptocurrencies. It goes up like that. So if you would like to have a whole bunch of data, then you would maybe start in 2016 or so, and then we have maybe, I don't know how many, maybe 3,000 cryptocurrencies, 2,500, something like that. So, but we have only like 2 years of data available. So if you want to investigate this data set and you want to figure out, okay, what drives these assets, then you have obviously very limited amount of time series data, but you have a huge amount of cross-sectional data. So, and in this case, again, we would use this cross-sectional techniques like the Fama-MacBeth approach. And also, if you have this time series regressions approach, you have to have data availability for the whole time span for all assets. And again, for Fama-MacBeth regressions, you don't necessarily need that. You have a model, and you can run a time series regression for the first asset from, let's say, 2000. If you have data from 2006 to 2011, and you get your point estimates, and you have for the other asset maybe data from 2007 under 2017, and you run the time series regression and you get the point estimate for that asset. So and in the same manner you can run the time series regressions irrespective of when the data starts or ends for all assets, and you get your point estimates for that model because you use the same model for all the stocks but different time series. So and these estimates are then in the second step of this approach input variables, or they are used as regressors, and this is what we will talk about now. So depending on your research question in your master's thesis, it's of course a good tool to know that approach at least. But I told you that one of my students that he's doing this research for hedge funds, and she has exactly the problem that she has a lot of hedge funds, like 2,000 or so, but only like a limited amount of time series data. And of course, in this case, she is advised to use this kind of approach to solve a research problem. So everything starts. So the first step of this approach is that we have n assets, and we run n times for I is 1 to n time series regressions. So the first step is running time series regressions of yit. Then we have here the alpha I to the intercept term, beta I1 times risk factor 1 at time t plus beta I2 times risk factor 2 time t, and so on. And let's say we have k risk factors times beta I capital K times risk factor k at time t. And then we have again this idiosyncratic part, this firm specific part or asset specific part, the error term I at time t. So that's our basic time series model, and now it's good to remember, or it's good to have in mind, that irrespective if we would assume the CAP-M or whatever asset pricing model we use is true or not true, you always include the intercept term in the first pass regression. In the time series, you always include the intercept term. Why, you might ask? Well, if you do not include an intercept term here, this guy here, the error term, doesn't necessarily have to be 0. But so that we get proper estimates for our factor sensitivities, we need to have an intercept term that is on average 0. So if we include the intercept term, we get proper or better properties of our point estimates for the slope parameters here. So that's why we always include the intercept term here in the first path regression. So when we use, of course, as we know already, and we have discussed it like millions of times here, we use our ONS formula. So we get a vector of point estimates, beta hat I, using this regressor matrix here. And this is our regressor matrix X, consists of a vector of 1s, of dimension t by 1, if we have capital T observations. So our time series runs from t1 until capital T. So our X matrix for the first regression has a vector of 1s on the first position, in the first column, a vector of excess returns of the first risk factor in the second column. Then in the third column, the excess returns of the second risk factor, and in the column k plus 1 we have the excess returns of risk factor k. Yeah? So it's our regressor matrix has a dimension t by k plus 1. We have k risk factors and an intercept term, so it's t by k plus 1. So we run this regression here. Using our standard formula, x prime x transpose times x prime yi, and yi in our context denotes the exact returns of stop I, and we do this n times for I is 1, and because we have capital N assets, in our case 14 assets, in our stock universe. So what we do then is, we gather, from each regression, we store the estimated betas here from the OLS regression, and we put it into a matrix. And this matrix we call, let's call it B hat, capital B hat. So what we have to code then is, again, we have to code a vector of ones, because in our cross-sectional regression we also include an intercept term. So we have a vector of ones in the first column. In the second column, we take the marker sensitivities against the first risk vector here. So the first element in the second column is the beta of asset I. In our case, it's the first asset against the first risk factor. And the last entry is the market sensitivity of our last test asset against the first risk factor. So here we have the sensitivities against risk factor 1. In the third column of our capital B hat matrix, we store all the sensitivities against the second risk factor from the OLS regression. So the first element then here is the estimated sensitivity of the first asset against the second risk factor. So the second element is then, of course, the sensitivity of the second asset against the second risk factor. And the last entry is then, of course, the sensitivity of our last asset, of our asset n, against the second risk factor. So we do this for all of our risk factors in our sample. So we end up, our last entry in the first row of our beta hat matrix is then the sensitivity, the estimated sensitivity beta hat of our first asset against risk factor k. And the last entry here in our matrix is the estimated sensitivity beta hat of our last asset, n asset, against risk factor k. Yeah. So in the last column here, we put in all of the sensitivities against the last risk factor, and we have here the asset dimension. So first row, the estimates for the first asset, second row, the estimates for the second regression for the second asset, and the last row we put in all the estimates, the beta estimates of our last asset. So vector k. So the dimension of our matrix that we construct is n by k plus 1. Right? N because we have n test assets here, we have n assets, in our case it's 14. And k plus 1 because we have k risk factors. So we need four k columns, capital K columns, and we add an intercept term here, a vector of constants. So it's k plus 1. So what we do then, so that's our second step. Our third step is that we run a second regression, where we use now our estimated betas here, this beta, capital beta hat matrix, as regressor matrix. Yeah. So, and our point estimates we denote as lambda hat. It's the same like in the RFM course. And it's actually the same formula as you see. So it's this guy here transposed itself, inverted, times itself transposed times capital Y. And capital Y, what is that? It's a vector of expected returns, or in our case of sample averages. So we put in here, in this Y vector, capital Y. It's an n by 1 vector, and what we have here is the expectation of y1. The second element is the expectation of y2, and the last is the expectation of our last asset, y1. And that's simply the sample average. So the first element is simply the sample average of our first asset. So the sample average of the excess returns of our first asset. And the second one is simply the sample average of the excess returns of the second asset. And the last item here in our capital Y vector is are the excess returns, or the average of the excess returns of our nth asset in our sample. So that's easy, of course, to do this in Matlab in a for loop. Yeah. So what we do is, so in the first path regression, let's say we use the Fama-MacBeth 3-factor model. Yeah. Then capital K is 3, and our X matrix is a T by 4 matrix, yeah, because we use an intercept term as well. So in this case, what we do is we regress the excess returns on the S&B factor, the market factor, and the HML factor. So what we try to do is we try to find out, does the variation in the market factor, in S&B, and in HML, does the variation in these three risk factors explain the excess returns of our asset I? So we regress the excess returns on our risk factors. So the question is, okay, do the risk factors explain the variation in our excess returns, in our assets? And this is in our model given by the beta estimates. So if the sensitivities, if the slope, if the sensitivities against the risk factors are significant, and the R-square is high, then we say, yeah, our risk factors obviously explain to some extent the variation of our excess returns. In this case here, what do we do here? So we regress the estimated sensitivities, the estimated betas, on the average returns. So the question arises, does the variation in sensitivities against the market factor, the S&B factor, or the value factor explain variation in average returns, in cross-sectional average returns? So it's a slightly different question that we basically address here. Now here we have average returns. We want to explain average returns by the loadings against the risk factors. So it's for instance, if we have if the lambda 1, well, let's say the corresponding lambda against the market factor, if it's 0.7, it means if the beta increases by 1%, the expected return increases by 0.7. So it tells us how sensitive, how do the expected returns change if the sensitivity against the risk factors change by 1 unit. So it's a slightly different, but though related question that we address. So that's an n by 1 vector here. Yeah. And we said, okay, the dimension of this beta, capital beta hat, is n by k plus 1. So in the first part here we transpose it, so it's k plus 1 by n. This is n by k plus 1, and it self-transposes again k plus 1 by n. And this guy here, we said already it's n by 1. So and the dimension here must be congruent, we know that from matrix algebra. So our lambda has the dimension, lambda hat is the dimension, it's a k plus 1 by 1 vector. Yeah? It's a k by 1 by 1. So and what we get, so it must have the same dimension as our beta hat. So in the same way as we compounded the covariance matrix of our betas, what we did in a couple of lectures already. So now we're interested in, okay, what's the covariance matrix of our lambda hat? And that's now a little bit different, of course. So because we have to operate with the empirical covariance matrix. Here, in this case, when our assumptions are satisfied, we know already what the variance of our beta hat was, right? It was sigma squared times x prime x inverted. Yeah? And we could derive that, basically easily derive that based upon our assumptions. Yeah? And we needed the covariance matrix here because we wanted to know if the sensitivities against our risk vectors are significant or not. But now we want to know if our lambdas are significant or not. If the risk premium here, the risk premium that are in our beta, in our gamma hat vector, are they significant or not? So, and we know already the general formula for the covariance matrix, our lambda hat, is the expectation of lambda minus the expectation of lambda times lambda minus the expectations of lambda transposed. Yeah, it's the same formula for the beta. It's exactly the same formula. Yeah, it's a general formula for estimating or for calculating the covariance matrix of a vector of random variables. Yeah. But what we do in our approach is we use the empirical covariance matrix. This is maybe something new, but nothing fancy anyways. So we proxy that by using the empirical covariance matrix, which is 1 over t, because we have t observations in our sample. And this expectation operator becomes then the sum sign, because we operate with discrete data. So it's the sum from t is 1 to capital T. So obviously we average something here. Yeah? And we take the lambda at time t minus the sample average times lambda at time t minus the sample average transposed. This guy here we know already. The sample average we have estimated here. We can use the estimated lambda from the second path regression here. Yeah, we use it here, and we use it here as well. But what's this guy here? This lambda at time t. So we know from our data matrix y. In the data matrix y, we store the exact returns of our n assets. So we have here the small y11, which are the exact returns of asset 1 at time 1. And in the last entry in the first column is y1t, which are the exact returns of asset 1 at time t. That's our standard exact return matrix that we have to have calculated already, and we have to have it already in our workspace in Matlab, so that we can here operate with it further. So in the second column we have, of course, the exact returns of the second asset at time t. The last entry is the exact returns of the second asset at time capital T, and so on. So the last asset, the last entry here, the last column is obviously the exact return of asset n at time 1, and the entry here are the exact returns of asset n at time capital T. So what we have here is a T by n matrix, right? That's our exact return matrix. So we have this formula here that we used in order to compound the average, using here as the regressant, we use the vector of sample averages of the exact returns here, right? But we can also use the exact returns across assets at time t is 1. So instead of using the sample averages, we can take the first row here and transpose it instead of using the sample averages here. So this guy here is just taking the averages of each column, and transpose it. Then we get the sample average. But instead we can just take one row and transpose it. It's also one row is n by 1. The dimension is the same like this one here, obviously. So we can grab the first column, the first row, which have the exact returns of all of our assets for time t is 1. T is 1. So we take the first row, and then we transpose it, and use it here as regressant. And what we get then is our lambda hat, our estimated lambda hat for time t. In this case, t is 1, right? So we use this formula here, and instead of the sample averages, we grab only the first row here and transpose it. And we can note it as capital YT is 1 in our case. So, and then we can use that guy and put it into this formula here. So then we have the first element for time t is 1. This estimate times our average lambda here, and then times itself transposed. So what we get then is, because our lambda has dimension k plus 1, because we have k risk factors at the intercept term. So the covariance matrix here, for each point in time, is a k by 1 times k by 1 matrix, of course. In the first iteration. In the second iteration, we do the same thing again, but now we go to the second row here. So we take the second row, where we have the exact returns for time t is 2. Use again this formula here, but then using here as regressant y for time t is 2. Then time t is 2. Then we put it in here again. We take it, we subtract the sample average here for the lambda hat that we already estimated a long time ago, times itself transposed, and it's again a k plus 1 times capital matrix, and add it to the previous estimate that we have already stored in Matlab. And we do this capital T times. We add all covariance matrices for each point in time. And then we take it, we divide it by the number of observations that we have. And what we get is the empirical sample covariance matrix. Yeah. And it's a k by 1 times k by 1 matrix. Yeah? If we use the Fama-MacBeth branch three-vector model, then we have here 4 elements. Yeah. It's in a 4 by 4 matrix. And then again, what you know already, we have to know the guys on the main diagonal. Yeah. And knowing that we have that our beta, that our lambda hat, in case we use the Fama-MacBeth three-vector model, we have intercept term, this lambda 0, then we have this lambda 1, which is the premium related to the market factor, then we have the premium, this lambda hat 2, which is the premium against for the SMB factor, then we have the premium against the value factor as well. So in this case we have the 4 by 1 vector, and in order to get the t statistic for each of our risk premiums here, we have to take each element and divide it by the square root of the element, of the corresponding element on the main diagonal of our empirical sample covariance matrix. It's the same thing that we have basically already done. Each corresponding element on the main diagonal matrix. So are there any questions concerning that? That's basically, in other words, what we have here in this script that I gave you, FamaMacBeth cross-sectional regression technique. Yeah. It's basically the same thing, what I wrote here. Yeah, it's the same steps. Just the last step is a little different here, because they're always, I told you all the time, there are always different ways to solve the same issue. So what we can also do, I mean, now this approach here, the Matlab script that I gave you, it has this approach here. So we estimate the empirical sample covariance matrix, yeah, using this formula here, yeah, so that you know a little bit more than other people do. So, but of course in the RM course we said, okay, and instead of doing this, if you really just want to know the t statistics, we can also take another path. So we can use this formula here. So this step is the same. So we have estimated our capital B hat matrix here, and we would t times do this iteration that we multiply each row of excess for our stocks at time t is 1 with this formula here until time capital T. Yeah. So what we would get is we would get capital T lambda vectors here. Yeah. So for each point in time we would get here the lambda 0 for time T is 1, then we have this lambda 1 for time T is 1, and then we have here our lambda K for time T is 1. Then we have here capital T times, so in the end, the last column here would be the lambda hat 0 for time capital T, and here the last element would be the lambda K for capital T. So yeah. So what we could then do is, okay, we take just the square root of the variance of the first row divided by t, and this would be then in the denominator of our t statistic. Yeah. So we would have in the denominator our point estimate, which is the first element of that guy here that we have already estimated, and we would divide it by the square root of the variance of this row here divided by t. Then we have the t statistic. And in the same manner, we would get the t statistic for the second guy, which is the lambda hat 1, by putting in here lambda hat 1 divided by the square root of the variance of this row here, our second row, which has t, capital T observations, divided by t. And so on and so forth. We would do this for all of our k risk factors, and then we would get the t statistic. So we don't necessarily have to estimate the several covariance matrix, but at least now we know how to do. Yeah. Because of course, I told you already before, I mean, what we have here, above and below the main diagonal here, are obviously the covariances between our lambdas, between our average risk premiums. And that's a little bit tricky to interpret, depending on, of course, on your research question. But usually we are interested, we want to know, okay, are the risk premium, are the average risk premia, which is what our lambda vector gives us, are they significant or not? Because, okay, if we run the first regression here, the time series regression, for a stock, and we see, okay, let's say this is the S&P factor, the second risk factor, and we see, okay, for the first stock, has a beta of 1.5, and it's significant. The t statistic is, let's say, 2.5. So then obviously the stock would be a small stock, because the loading is larger than 1, it's positive and it's significant against the size factor. So, but it could be that the second stock, that the loading against size factor is not significant. So just because it's significant for one stock doesn't imply that it's significant for all the stocks. So, and our cross-sectional regression, it tells us basically if the variation of this betas across our assets, if this has an impact, if this has an impact on the average return. So it gives us the average impact. So it could be that for some single stocks, the loadings against the size factor are significant, but it could be that in the cross-section, the risk premium for the size factor could be statistically not be different from 0, which would imply that the size factor has cross-sectionally considered no impact, or it's not priced. So for the variation of the beta against the size factor does not explain the cross-sectional average returns. So this is how we would interpret in that case. So, are there any questions? Yeah, it's a quite useful method, I think. In particular nowadays, if we have certain asset classes where we have all of a sudden, we have much more mutual funds than we have stocks. We have a huge asset universe, but a limited number of time series observations. So that's a method that you then basically can use for this kind of research questions. So how to implement that in Matlab? So the code is written like that. So you have to have already this Y matrix. You have to have it already uploaded in matrix in Matlab, and you have to make sure that the dimensions are right. So depending on how you write the code. Yeah? So you have to know, of course, if this is a T by N matrix, then of course in this step here, you need to know that you have to take the first row and transpose it if you want to get the lambda for time t. So, but if you code it as a n by t matrix, you just have to get the first column and put it here. So you have to know what dimensions your matrices have in order to make the calculations correctly. That's why I always tell you have to know what you do. And this is something that you cannot do in eViews. This is not available in eViews. So you have to code it. So in this case, so the Y matrix and the X matrix, load here it says load X, that denotes the vector matrix. So you have to have the X matrix already defined before you run that code here. Yeah. And it can be, you can use of course different regression matrices here. So depending on what asset pricing model you use, yeah, you can use, if you use the Fama-MacBeth 5 vector model, then your X matrix has capital T rows and 5 columns. Yeah? And if you use the 6 vector model, then it has a dimension T by 6. So the code is written like that, that if you upload the vector matrix, you do not have the intercept term there. It's given here in the code later. So here we define the length of our time series dimension, and we can write here length of x. If we have the S&P 500, then we have then our n, which denotes the asset dimension, is then 500. We use the OMX 25 in Helsinki, then n is 25. So depending on your stock universe. So here we have defined the number of risk factors. If you use the Fama-MacBeth 6 vector model, like the new vector model, then k is 6. So the first step that we have already discussed here, run n times OLS regressions and store the estimated betas in the matrix. So now we are here. We want to construct our capital B head matrix. Yeah? So for each time series regression, we want to grab the estimated betas, not the alpha here, only the betas, and put it here. And that's exactly what happens here. So first of all, we do what we always do. We construct a zero matrix, where we store our results for each iteration. So in this case, it's capital beta is equal to zeros n by k. Yeah. So we store only our betas here. So it's from column 2 to column k plus 1. So these columns here. So the estimates, we only want to store here the estimates of our beta hat. So the sensitivities against each single risk factor. So this dimension is n by k. Now we will consider the intercept term. We put the vector of 1s here in this matrix later on. First we only want to construct this part of the matrix, and it's a little bit engineering what we do here, okay? So what happens here? So we have a loop, the first for loop from 1 to n. So it's the asset dimension here. Now we are here. We do this n times, capital N times, because we have n as our sample. So first we access the vector of stocks. So now I is 1. In the first iteration, I is 1. So that means we grab the first asset, the first stock of our sample. And then our Y matrix, the way how we have defined it here in this example, it's in the first column. In the first column, we have the excess returns of the first stock. In this course, it has always been like that. Yeah, it was always like that we have in the first column of our exact return matrix, the exact return of the first stop. So, and the index here, our loop, the outer loop goes from small n, so it starts, the index is small n, and it goes from 1 to capital N. Capital N is our number of assets. So, and the first iterations, small n is 1. So that is, we define small y as the exact returns. So we access the exact returns for the first stop. So then we define the regressor and the intercept term. So we define again now the vector of ones that we have to put that we have to put first in our regressor matrix here. So now we are in the time series dimension, as I told you. So constant should be a vector of ones that has dimension capital T, because in our time series regression we have capital T, our time series dimension is capital T by 1. So it's a vector that has capital T observations and ones. So capital X1 is our X matrix that we need here for the first part regressions, and this is always the same in each iteration, of course, because we use the same risk factor matrix for pricing all these blocks. So we define capital X1 as, and we know these brackets here, it defines in Matlab matrix. Yeah? It means, okay, construct this matrix, and what should be in it? Okay, the first column vector in this matrix is this constant, the vector of ones that we just constructed here, and x. And x we have already in the workspace. It's our matrix of risk factors, yeah, that we need to have already uploaded. Yeah. So we go to the Fama-MacBeth website, download the data, the Excel file, and upload it into Matlab and define it as x. Yeah. And then we define our x1 as this constant guy, this constant vector here that we just defined, plus this matrix that we uploaded. So then b underscore hat. So what we get now is we get for each single stock now in the if small n is 1, we do it for the first stock. We get this the beta estimates, yeah, the beta vector. So the sensitivities against the risk factors, and also the intercept term. But now remember, we are only interested in the market in the sensitivities against the risk factors. We are not interested in this guy here. So we regress the exact returns of the first stock on our regressor matrix that we just here defined. Yeah? So that's nothing new here. And what we get is a k plus 1 by 1 vector here. Beta underscore hat is a k plus 1 by 1 vector, yeah, for each single asset. So then, what we do is we store something in the first row of beta in all columns. Note that this double point means take all columns, and the second in our parentheses, the second element denotes our column index. I told many times. So in the first iteration, small n is 1, and we access all columns. And we know we have k columns because beta is an n by k matrix. So we have to store, we want to store k elements. So beta underscore hat has k plus 1 elements, because we have also the estimate for the intercept term here. But we don't want them. We want to start here. So therefore, beta underscore hat means, and then in parentheses 2, double point k plus 1 means, okay, take the start at the second element until element k plus 1. The second element is the sensitivity against the first risk factor, and k plus 1 is here the last element in our beta underscore hat vector. Yeah? So now we depict these elements here, and we have to transpose it, because this is a k. This guy here, if we access only these elements, this is k by 1 vector. So we have to transpose it so that it becomes 1 by k. because we want to store it here in the first row, and this must be 1 by k. So, and if you have done the first iteration, then small n goes to 2. And what happens then here? So we grab, so this goes to 2, and the second column in our exact return matrix, then we have the exact return of the second stop, of course. So this is the same. Our regressor matrix is the same. This doesn't change. This beta underscore hat is now overwritten. This guy here changes because it's now defined as the exact returns of the second stop. So we regress the exact return of the second stop on our regressor matrix here. We again get the corresponding parameter estimates against our risk factors here for the second stop. And beta underscore hat is again a k plus 1 by 1 vector, because we have here still the intercept term in order to get proper estimates for our betas here. So we want to store them in our beta I told you here. K. And here we have n. So now we have done that in the first iteration, and now we want to put in here the corresponding estimates. Yeah? And this is what happens here. So our beta underscore hat, we again access the elements 2 until k plus 1. So we want to start here. That's the first element, that's the second, and this is k plus 1 element. So these guys we grab, and because this guy here is a column vector, so we have to transpose it in order to put it in here. Yeah, that's what happens here. That's why we have the transpose sign here. So, and then again, we end here and we go to small n is 3. And we do the same again using the third exact returns of the third stop. Is this clear, everybody? So this is what we have done for the first step here. So we have run the capital N time series regressions. Yeah. Once this is completed, we have our beta, capital beta hat, at least the most part of it here. We have this part here. Huh? All the elements, all the estimated sensitivities we have in this beta capital, in this BETA matrix here stored. After we have then we have the array numbers here. Yeah? So now the second step is we have to run the cross-sectional regression. So after we have completed that, we have to run the cross-sectional regression. And now remember, we need again here a vector of 1s. But this time here, it should not be a t by 1 vector, like here in the time series regression, but in the cross-sectional regression, we have n assets, so this must be an n by 1 vector. Yeah? N by 1. So this is exactly also what we do here. We define a new vector when we, in this case, I define it as constant 1. Of course, you can name it or you can define it however you want. So in this case, it's constant 1. It's 1s in parentheses capital N, 1. So it just gives us a vector of, in our case, if we have 500 assets, then it's a 500 by 1 vector here. Yeah. So and we need that guy and put it in here. So we define a new, now we define the whole guy here, where we put in first this vector of 1s, and then our capital beta hat matrix that we already have estimated in the previous step. And we define it here as capital beta beta 1 is equal with, and then we have again this parenthesis here. And I told you that this means, okay, we define a matrix here. So, and what do we put in? So, the first column should be this vector of ones that we have, of dimension n by 1. And then we put in here the whole matrix, which has the dimension n by k. Yeah? So, the whole dimension of this beta 1 matrix that we have defined here is obviously n by k plus 1. We simply added a vector to our n by k matrix that we already constructed earlier. Yeah? And what we get is the whole matrix here, which is n by k plus 1. So that's our beta 1. And this is now what we need for our second regression here. So what else do we need? We need the vector of sample average excess returns. So this is the n by 1 vector because we have n assets, and now we have to create a vector where we put in the corresponding sample averages for each asset. Yeah? So the first element should be the sample average of the excess returns for the first asset. The second element is the sample average of the excess returns of the second asset, and so on. So this is what's going on here. We again do it in a for loop because it's so easy. So we define this guy here, our capital Y, we define it here as Y underscore expected, the expected returns. So it's equal to zeros. So first of all, we have to construct a result matrix where we store our sample averages in, and it's zeros n by 1, of course, yeah? Because we have n sample averages to deal with. So again, we formulate a for loop for small n is 1 double point capital N, so it starts at small n is 1 at the first asset until we reach the last asset, which is capital 1. And it's very simple. So it means, okay, the first element, if small n is 1, what do we store in here, in this y underscore expected vector? So this command we know already. This mean command in Matlab gives us the average of what is in parentheses. So what is the parentheses? Mean of capital Y. Capital Y is our excess return matrix, right? That is already in our workspace. And in parentheses, double point, comma 1. So it means again, take all rows from the first column. Small n is 1 in our first iteration, and in the first column we know are the excess returns of the first stop. So this command gives you the mean, so the sample average of the excess returns of the first column, and there are the excess returns of the first stop. And it stores it as the first element in our y underscore expected vector. And in the same manner, then the loop goes to small n is 2, and then it stores here in the second element something. And what do we store here? Yeah, we store the mean, so the average of the second column of our excess return matrix. Yeah, and we do this until we have completed this procedure for all n assets. And what we get then is the vector of sample average returns or of expected returns that we need here for our second pass regression. So, and then we have all the inputs here. Yeah? We have created this guy here, we have created this guy here. So now we just have to run again our popular OLS formula, and we have done this so many times here. So what's that? So our capital lambda here, this is now this guy here, our lambda hat. What is that? So it's beta 1 transpose times itself, inverted, yeah, to the power of -1, yeah, which means inverted, times itself transposed times our vector of average returns. Exactly what we want to have here. So, in the next step here, so note now that here, this guy here is exactly the same. It doesn't change. Yeah? It's still stored in our workspace. It's the same that we used here. Now we use this guy here in a new for loop, which goes from 1 to t. What are we doing now? Now we estimate this guy here. We estimate for each point in time, starting here, t is 1. We get these lambdas. Then we do it for time t is 2 and get a new vector of lambdas until time is capital T, and we get a new vector of lambdas. So we do the same procedure now, but we use now the excess returns of stock 1 or our asset 1 to capital N for each point in time. This is exactly what happens here. So we want to store our results in a matrix consisting of zeros that has a dimension capital K plus 1, because we have K risk vectors and the intercept term, so it's K plus 1 by T. So first, this guy here is a zero matrix. It's K plus 1 by T, consisting of zero. So then we have a loop from small t, 1 to capital T. So now we store something here for each point in time. First we store elements here, then here, then here, until we have completed, until we have put in here something for each point in time. So, and what are we doing here? So, if small t is 1, and again, this was a column dimension. The first column is 1, and double point means put in something in the first column and in all rows. So here. And what should we put in here? So what we do is here, so we regress the excess returns across stocks at time t is 1. You'll see what we have here. If this guy is 1, it means get all entries of our excess returns that are in the first row, and double point means take all columns. So and in the first row and all columns are the excess returns of asset 1, 2, 3 under capital N. Are the excess returns of our n stocks for time t is 1. So when we have to transpose that guy, it's transposed so that the dimension here is correct. Yeah. So if you write a code and you would not transpose that and you would run the code, Matlab would give you an error message. Then you have to figure out, okay, where did I do it wrong? Where's my error? And then you have to figure out in your script, okay, most likely this is how it's for me most of the time. I do an error in the dimension here. So you have always to have in mind how you define your input matrix. So this is what you have always to have in mind. Otherwise, you get errors, and then you have to figure out that it can take a lot of time. So what we get then here is we get the lambdas for each point in time. Yeah? In the first iteration, we get the lambda for time t is 1. Yeah, and we store it here in this matrix consisting of zeros. Then we have stored something in the first column here. Then we do it for time t is 2, yeah, and so on and so forth. So we do it capital T times. So until we have our risk premia across time, and we store this in this lambda matrix. Yeah? So when we have completed that, we want to estimate the covariance matrix. It's, first of all, again, we have to define it as a zero matrix where we then store iteratively our results in. So in this case, I define it as covariance underscore lambda. First, I define a zero matrix, and the dimension must be k plus 1 by k plus 1. Yeah, here. We talked about it earlier, that the covariance matrix, the empirical sample covariance matrix, has a dimension k plus 1 by k plus 1, because we have k risk factors and we have also an intercept term. So, and again, it's running from t is 1 to capital T. Yeah? So we do now something here. Yeah? So what we do in the first iteration, if small t is 1, first we define C, our capital C here, means covariance. Yeah? And it's overwritten obviously in each iteration here. So because we don't need it. It's just a step in between. So it's 1 over t, so we take 1 over t of that expression here. And what do we have here in parentheses is lambda, take all elements of our lambda matrix that are in the first column. Yeah? So these are the risk premia for time t is 1. They are here in the first column of our lambda matrix that we have already stored. We have already estimated that earlier in the previous step, minus this average lambda, which we have also already estimated, it's already in the workspace, times itself the same and the same expression transposed. So what's that? That's this formula here. Yeah. Now we take it step by step. Yeah. We take now this formula for each point in time and sum it up, divided by 1 over t. So then the covariance underscore lambda, which we have, which I see is still a zero matrix, is then the zero matrix plus c. Now we have overwritten it. So it's now itself, and it was earlier a zero matrix, but now it has some estimates in it, and we add what we have here just calculated. In the next iteration, now this is stored. This is now stored in the covariance underscore lambda. It's not any longer a zero matrix. Now we have put in the first estimated sample covariance matrix for time t is 1. So then we go in the for loop to time t is 2, and what happens then is, in this equation here, we take the second guy of our lambda matrix minus, again, this average lambda that we have already estimated. It's still in the workspace here, this guy, times itself transposed. So again, we use this formula here for time t is 2. Yeah. That's now our C. And then we add it to what we have now overwritten, this covariance underscore lambda matrix. So now it becomes bigger. Yeah. And it doesn't matter if we take in each step, if we multiply it with 1 over t, or if we would sum up first all of the elements and take it afterwards, this 1 over t. That doesn't matter. In this code here, we do it in each step. Yeah, and we go basically through our lambda matrix here, across time, yeah, and do the same iteration over and over again until we have completed all these time varying lambdas here and have estimated the specific covariance matrix to each point in time. then what we get is here, of course, the average. Because we only add 1 over t of each covariance matrix together. So that when we end up with, if we have completed that loop, what we get is this k plus 1 times k plus 1 matrix. So this depends, of course, on our factor matrix, what risk factors we use as regressors. And then finally we want to get the t statistics. Yeah. So we grab from our vector here of average lambdas. So we grab each element here and divide it by the corresponding element here that is on the main diagonal of our sample covariance matrix. This is what happens here. First, we want to store the t statistic. We again have to create a zero vector where we store the results, and I denoted here in this code as t underscore stat underscore lambda equal to zeros, and the dimension is k plus 1 by 1, because we have k to 1 plus 1 elements here in our lambda vector, storing the risk premium. So then we have a for loop that goes from I1 until capital K plus 1. And now we store in our like zero vector something, and we take the corresponding elements in our average lambda hat vector. So we start with the first element, and that's related to the intercept term, obviously the cross-sectional intercept term. So, and we divide it by the square root of our sample covariance matrix and the element II, which is the first element here, and divide it by the number of observations. So it's the square root of this variance divided by t. And we do this for all of our elements in our risk premium vector lambda. Is this clear to everybody? So now I have one question. So in the RFM course we were talking about this GRS test. Who of you was in the RFM? You were in the RFM course, right?
What?
You were in the RFM course, right?
Which course?
RFM. Research in Financial Markets.
Research in Financial Markets.
Yeah. Have you been there?
I don't think so. Have I? No.
Have you been there? Well, but you have been there, right? I'm the only one who have been in this course. Have you been there? Okay. So you are the only one who have been in this course.
Yeah, my survivors also.
Okay. Yeah, well, so if we have enough data available, so if we have, let's say we have for our n stocks, let's say we have 500 stocks, and we have for each of the stock in the time series dimension all available information, then obviously we don't need this approach here, right? So then we can easily operate with a multiple model, as this GRS test approach, where we basically have multiple equations, and then we would test these alphas here simultaneously. We need enough time series observations, of course, but let's assume we have enough time series observations available for our assets, and then we can basically run a multivariate f-test where we test these alphas here for our multiple equations simultaneously. This is called GRS test, basically. So, and this GRS test tells you if the average alpha here, which is basically the pricing error, because it measures the systematic part of this error term here. So if the alpha in the time series regression is on average different from 0, this means, or if this guy here is on average across assets significant, this means that our asset pricing model here, for instance the Fama-MacBeth 5-factor model, cannot explain or it cannot price the excess returns of our multiple excess returns completely. Yeah. So if we operate with this cross-sectional approach, we can have a look on the intercept term here, this lambda hat 0. Yeah. Because what does that tell us? So if you go back to the time series approach, this alpha tells us how much of the excess returns cannot be explained by exposures against our risk factors. In the cross-sectional approach, we operate with average returns. So this intercept term here, the first element in our lambda vector, yeah, it's associated with the intercept term here in this capital beta hat matrix. So it tells us what parts of the average returns across stocks cannot be explained by variation in the betas. So what part of the average returns in our sample of assets cannot be explained by the variation of the beta loadings against the risk factors. So if this guy is statistically different from 0, so if we have this distribution here, and let's say this guy is as a t statistic, or let's make it more practical. So let's say the point estimate is 0.4, and the t statistic, we know we have this critical values of 1.96 and minus 1.96, and the t statistic is, let's say, 2.6. The point estimate is 0.4 and the t statistic is 2.6. So what does it tell you? It tells you that 0.4% of the average returns across our stocks cannot be explained by the variation in the betas, and it's significant on a 5% level, in this case even on a 1% level. So our pricing model here cannot explain the cross-section of expected returns. And what we want to see is, if the risk factor is priced, what we want to see is that the lambda should be positive and it should be significant. If the lambda is positive and significant, let's say it's 0.6, let's say that beta 2, which is the sensitivity against the size factor, or which basically captures the risk premium associated with the size factor, let's say it's 0.5, the t statistic is 2.2. So that means that that the expected returns across our stocks could move positively with variation in the sensitivity against the size factor. So a higher beta against the size factor would imply higher expected returns on average of 0.5%. And as the t statistic would be 2.2, it's significantly different on a 5% level. So in the same manner, you could of course investigate the risk premiums associated with the other risk factors. So if we have, for instance, if the last element in our lambda vector would be the risk premium for the value factor, and the risk premium is, let's say, it's also 0.5, yeah, then it would mean, okay, that if the one unit higher beta risk would be on average associated with 0.5% higher expected returns. And if the d-statistic is higher than 1.96, the risk premium is statistically different from 0 in that case. And in the same manner, you can investigate all the other risk factors or risk premium as well. Yeah. So it's a somewhat different approach compared to our standard time series regression. So is this clear to everybody? What's going on here? So that's something obviously that ELUS is not offering yet. So if you have this kind of research question in your master thesis, then you can easily implement it now. Whatever asset universe you're interested in. And I told you already there are many different approaches. That's a simple approach here that I was sharing here with you. This is a very simple approach to use basically our point estimates, and we just let we access the variation of our exact return matrix here, and then we get the new time varying risk premium, and then based upon that we compound the sample covariance matrix. That's the simple approach. Obviously it's not 100% correct statistically. Why not? Because we use already in the first step here, we use already estimates. These are estimates, these are not really parameters. This is our best guess of our parameters. But we use estimates, so we have to use actually a correction here in order to get the covariance matrix correctly. And there's a paper from Shanken, there's a Shanken correction. If you Google that, you might get what I'm talking about here. So actually, that's a very simple approach and statistically not 100% correct. And we also know from our first lecture already that the betas are time varying, so the market sensitivity might change. So what people also have proposed is to re-estimate the beta using a time window of 60 months, get the betas, get the corresponding risk premium, and then do it all over again. Move the time window 1 month forward, again using 60 months of data, like we did last time. Then again getting this risk premium, and by this getting the variation of the risk premium by using a moving or a rolling time window for estimating the betas here. So we use basically always like time varying betas that lead to time variation in our risk premium. So there are different approaches how you can basically how this method here what has been developed across time, because it's based upon the 73 paper, and you can imagine that there are many follow-up papers that somehow modified or improved this method. Other methods are bootstrapping. So you can basically come up with you can create, there's like a code, or you can code it, you can create new artificial data samples using bootstrapping methods. And so you use a new bootstrap sample, do the same all over again, and so you can construct 1 billion of bootstrap samples, and you get your new beta estimates. And there are also methods that ensure, basically, it's called block bootstraps, that you take, that basically ensures that the correlation structure across assets is not violated. So you use basically, if you have let's say you have a data sample of 100 let's say you have 180 months or so, that you use, for instance, blocks of 60 months, randomly drawn, and put it into the new matrix, and to construct a new data sample. So you use always blocks that have the same block length, let's say 60 months or so, randomly drawn out of these 180 months, and draw it with replacement. Draw with replacement. You know this from statistics, right? So there are many different methods how to basically to play around and how to improve this Fama-MacBeth approach. Yeah, so if, but this is, as I told you, this is one easy approach, one easy solution how to do that, how to implement that easily in Matlab. And that's what I wanted to go through today, and next time we reach the peak of our lecture somehow, you know. So you will, next time we will talk about momentum, how to implement momentum training strategies in Matlab, and how small changes in the main code can lead to, yeah, how you can easily get new strategies by just small modifications in the main script.